strategic dissonance, and the pivot of the Pacific War. January to August 1942. The strategic zenith. Japan's early 1942 expansion and the long war warning. The rapid conquest and the illusion of invincibility. By January 5, 1942, the Imperial Japanese forces had achieved unprecedented success across the Pacific and Southeast Asia. Exultant shouts of victory echoed in Tokyo as the Imperial Combined Fleet Staff, under Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, was instructed to commence preparations for the second stage of operations in the Pacific War. Situation reports detailing the swift subjugation of the Philippines, Malaya, and Point South indicated that Japanese troops would be in full control of East Asia and other attacked areas within a few short months. The astonishing speed with which the Japanese conquered the Western Pacific not only surprised the Allies, but also profoundly affected the internal dynamics of the Imperial General Staff in Tokyo. This rapid, seemingly effortless expansion fueled sharp disagreement within the Japanese military command. The ardent military nationalists insisted on pressing their advantage, driven by the belief that Japan should continue its victorious momentum, regardless of how far afield such planning led, advocating for unlimited war. This dominant sentiment, however, stood in direct opposition to a more cautious faction, represented by Admiral Yamamoto. Admiral Yamamoto's Cassandra complex, the imperative for swift peace. Admiral Yamamoto harbored deep reservations about initiating war with the United States and Britain, primarily due to his intimate knowledge of American industrial and material capacity. His experience included serving as Japanese naval attaché in Washington from 1926 to 1928, and participating in the London naval conferences of 1930 and 1934, providing him with a nuanced perspective that many of his colleagues lacked. He openly criticized the politicians, such as Prince Kone, who he believed lacked a clear understanding of the kind of war Japan was waging. Yamamoto warned ultra-nationalist friends, such as Ryoshi Sasakawa, that although Japan would initially experience great success, describing the conquest stretching out like an octopus spreading its tentacles, this euphoria could not endure. Just a month into the conflict, the octopus had spread almost flat, yet Yamamoto maintained that the decisive window for action was limited. He declared that once the decisive victory was won, Japan would have only a year and a half to bask in glory before American mobilization overwhelmed their gains. He looked to the fall of Singapore, which he did not expect for 5 or 6 months, but which ultimately occurred on 15th February, as the key moment for Japanese political leaders to initiate peace talks before the inevitable Western counter-mobilization began. The immediate, almost effortless victories confirmed the biases of the military nationalists who favored endless expansion. This immediate success structurally reinforced the political power of the very faction, the IJA nationalists, that Yamamoto feared, rendering his subsequent attempts to impose strategic caution or negotiate peace virtually impossible. The sinking of the British capital ships and the rapid conquest validated the octopus spread, but simultaneously doomed Yamamoto's critical timeline for peace. Political feuds and the internal marginalization of dissent. The strategic disagreements took on a dangerous political dimension. Yamamoto's open opposition to unlimited war was so public and entrenched that friends on the Imperial General Staff feared he would be assassinated if he remained in Tokyo. Consequently, he was moved to sea aboard the Combined Fleet flagship Yamato. This necessity for the strategist flee Tokyo for his personal safety and his continued criticism even bore the Combined Fleet flagship reveals that Japan's strategic decisions were being made not in a purely rational military context, but were heavily influenced by extremist political sentiment. His exile aboard the Yamato minimized his direct political influence over the Imperial General Staff IGS planning process, enabling the adoption of aggressive strategies that disregarded his logistical and industrial warnings. His chief of staff, Tomoe Ogaki, recorded in his diary the urgent need for far-sighted statesmanship following the initial glorious victories, words Yamamoto often used to underscore the long-term impossibility of prevailing against the Western powers in a protracted conflict. The contested path to Phase 2 operations, the drive toward Midway. The strategic chasm, Japanese Army versus Navy objectives. Following the consolidation of Phase 1 objectives, Yamamoto ordered Chief of Staff Ugaki to complete plans for the second stage by mid-February 1942. However, the formulation of a cohesive follow-up strategy was severely hampered by deep-seated strategic disagreements between the Imperial Army, IJA, and the Imperial Navy, IJN, compounded by bureaucratic infighting within the Navy's Imperial General Headquarters, IH. Fleet. 3 major strategic alternatives were offered for the continuation of operations. The Army immediately vetoed Yamamoto's suggestion for an attack on the Soviet Union, arguing that such a war would be fought almost entirely on land, and the IJA was already heavily occupied in China and Southeast Asia. Vetting alternatives and the decisive strike imperative, Yamamoto's preferred choice was the Indian Ocean operation, invading Ceylon, drawing out the British Far Eastern Fleet, and destroying it in a manner reminiscent of the Pearl Harbor strike. The ultimate goal was to push into the Middle East, to link up with German forces advancing toward the Soviet oil fields in the Caucasus, thus securing Japan's vital oil supply. However, the IJA refused to consider a Middle Eastern operation, limiting the IJN's options. The IJA's stubborn refusal to countenance the Indian Ocean Middle East plan due to its preoccupation with the China theater demonstrated a fundamental lack of combined strategic coordination. By blocking the path to guaranteed oil supplies and linking with the Axis, a truly strategic goal, the IJ forced the IJN into a high-risk, purely tactical objective, Midway, destroying carriers that would not, even if successful, secure the long-term resource base necessary to win the unlimited, or this forced a pivot away from a war of resources toward a war of annihilation, based on an unfounded hope regarding the erosion of U.S. resolve. With the first 2 options eliminated, only 2 plans remained. The Naval General Staff advocated for an attack on Australia, moving through the Solomon Islands and New Guinea to take New Caledonia, Fiji, and Samoa, thereby depriving the Americans of a forward operating base. Yamamoto disliked this Australia plan, believing it would take too long and would not be spectacular enough to halt the Americans and force negotiations within his strict time limit. Instead, Yamamoto focused on his own proposal, the MIAP plan and the AL plan. The MIAP plan envisioned a major battle off Midway Island, designed to lure out and destroy the American carrier force, the major elements of the United States fleet that had escaped destruction at Pearl Harbor. The AL plan detailed the invasion of the North American continent via Alaska's Aleutian Islands. Victories at Midway and in the Aleutians would, Yamamoto hoped, provide the political leverage for Japan to extend a generous olive branch and achieve the negotiated peace he desired. The Doolittle catalyst, forcing action and overriding caution. The internal conflict between Yamamoto and the IGS is abruptly terminated by the 18th 1942 raid on Tokyo, led by Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle's B-25 bomber squadron. Although the material damage inflicted was limited, the raid had a catastrophic psychological impact, shattering Tokyo's deeply held sense of invulnerability. The Japanese leadership was profoundly shocked, viewing the raid as an immediate threat to the home islands. In response, they were forced to divert valuable defense resources and felt compelled to act immediately to extend their defensive perimeter. This sudden need for a spectacular, immediate countermeasure allowed Yamamoto to override the IGS's caution regarding Midway. The resulting panic secured the approval for the ambitious, high-risk operation aimed at the destruction of the U.S. carrier force, forcing Yamamoto to accelerate his plans. The paradox of the MIAP plan was that the operation intended to set the stage for peace negotiation was launched under conditions of internal panic and urgency, a direct result of an American psychological victory. This forced Yamamoto to move before his forces were optimally prepared or deployed, maximizing the inherent risks. 3. The shifting axis. Midway and the South Pacific pivot. The reckoning at Midway. Destruction of carrier air power. In June 1942, the strategic calculus of the Pacific War was irrevocably altered at Midway Atoll. American cryptanalysts, having successfully broken parts of the Japanese naval code, identifying the target AF as Midway, were able to prepare an ambush, while Japanese aircraft attacked the base on the 4th of June. The Deception, Hornet, and Yorktown were positioned, ready for battle just east of the island. The resulting battle saw the swift and unexpected destruction of 4 big fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, forcing Admiral Yamamoto to order the abandonment of the operation and retirement of all remaining ships on the fight. This single catastrophic loss eliminated the core of Japan's offensive naval air capability. Strategic deception, the calculated suppression of defeat. The severity of the defeat at Midway was carefully suppressed by the Imperial Japanese Navy, IJN. The full extent of the loss, 4 fleet carriers destroyed, was known only at the highest levels of the Navy, and by Emperor Hirohito. Hirohito was informed privately on the 8th of June, and maintained morale, responded that the losses, though regrettable, should not interfere with the Navy's fighting spirit. This high-level patronage provided cover for the IJN's subsequent deception of the Imperial General Headquarters, IHQ, and the Army, IJA. News of the defeat was reported to the forces in the field as a victory, and the official bulletins distorted the reality, initially listing only 1 carrier sunk and another damaged. The sunken carriers remained on the naval registry as damaged for bureaucratic concealment, contributing to a paper shell game that obscured the truth. This intentional obfuscation was highly effective. Prime Minister Tojo complained post-war that he did not know the reality of the losses until a full month after the battle. The successful deception by the IJN, while saving face and maintaining bureaucratic control, proved detrimental to Japan's overall war effort. Because the Army did not know the Navy was critically weakened, they continued supporting operations that required air superiority the IJN could no longer provide. This secrecy guaranteed that future battles would be fought under disastrously optimistic operational assumptions regarding Japanese carrier air power. The Naval General Staff's post-Midway focus, shifting south, while Yamamoto's combined fleet was engaged in the disastrous Midway excursion, the Naval General Staff in Tokyo was steadily executing its own expansion strategy, moving naval and air forces southward to establish an operational perimeter and cut off Australia. Rapole on Ireland had been taken on the 23rd of January, and constant reconnaissance and bombing raids were conducted against other islands and New Guinea. This activity signaled to the Australians that a major move against New Guinea was imminent, potentially to a walkover invasion of northern Australia. Despite the Midway defeat, IGHQ did not alter its regional plans, operating on the flawed premise of continued carrier superiority. Lieutenant General Harukichi Hayotake was ordered to press toward New Caledonia, Fiji, and Samoa, and to resume the advance against Port Moresby by July, expecting Yamamoto's, now non-existent, carrier force to protect the move. The Naval General Staff's existing southward push, the plan Yamamoto had rejected as too slow, now became the only viable path after the catastrophic failure of the spectacular Midway option. This shift transformed the war from Yamamoto's preferred high-stakes fleet action into a protracted, grinding battle for island bases and attrition, precisely the type of conflict he had warned Japan could not win in the long run. Operation Watchtower, Allied Command, Friction and Expedient Action. The King MacArthur Command Dispute, control over the South Pacific. Following the Midway victory, Allied leaders recognized the opportunity to seize the initiative months earlier than anticipated. General Douglas MacArthur, now headquartered in Australia, immediately suggested a preemptive strike against the Japanese hub at Rabaul, involving an assault on New Britain and New Ireland, requiring 2 carriers and 10 planes. MacArthur sought to force the Japanese back to truck. Admiral Ernest J. King, Chief of Naval Operations, strongly opposed MacArthur's proposal, primarily because it would place the Navy as critical carrier forces under Army command. King, utilizing an earlier, uncancelled memorandum approved by President Roosevelt for a limited offensive into the Solomons, maneuvered to seize operational control. General Marshall, Chief of Staff of the Army, offered a modified MacArthur plan, but King continued to oppose any plan that put MacArthur in command of the fighting. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, JCS, settled the matter by compromise, driven by the acute necessity of stopping the Japanese advance on New Guinea and Australia. The JCS delineated the operation into phases. Phase I, Watchtower. The primary task of taking the Santa Cruz Islands, Tulagi, and adjacent positions, Guadalcanal, was assigned to Admiral King, meaning it would be commanded by the Navy. Vice Admiral Robert L. Gormley. Phase II, MacArthur was nominally placed in control of the mop-up operations in the rest of the Solomons, Rabaul, and New Guinea. King gained approval because his defensive line plan required relatively less immediate force than MacArthur's full Rabaul assault, and he already had troops training in New Caledonia, facilitating immediate action. Intelligence and preparation. Failures. Operation Watchtower, the first major American amphibious operation of World War II, was defined by extreme haste and logistical chaos. Vice Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner, King's chief plans officer, was detached to command the amphibious operation and was tasked with training a whole task force in only 1 month. The logistical support for the invasion was inadequate. Supplies were loaded hodgepodge aboard the transports at Oakland, rather than in the order of intended use, creating immediate logistical failures upon reaching the staging area. Admiral King, knowing the critical necessity of stopping the Japanese advance toward Australia, deemed the timetable inviolable. Accepting delay was not possible, thus forcing the Americans to risk all. Despite their lack of preparation for the actual assault was minimal. A rehearsal staged at Kororo Island, near Fiji, lasted 3 days, but only a third of the assigned troops managed to get ashore, prompting Marine General Alexander Vandegrift to deem the mock-up a complete bust. This hasty preparation validated the warnings of military analysts like Basil Liddell Hart, who had declared that landing on a hostile shore had become almost impossible. The Allied rush to action highlights that the operation was launched not when the Allies were ready, but when intelligence suggested the Japanese would be ready by completing the airfield. This prioritization of operational speed over logistical perfection carried maximum risk to preempt the Japanese establishment of air dominance in the South Pacific. Critical intelligence lapses, and the uncovered slot. Intelligence concerning Japanese activity at Guadalcanal was fraught with errors. While Allied intelligence noted airfield construction by late May, reports reaching Admiral King on the 10th of July were casual, and days later, the field was mistakenly located on the wrong side of the island. However, crucial radio intelligence was intercepted on July 4th of July, confirming that the 11th and 13th Pioneer construction units were arriving at their destination. This interception by Nimitz's intelligence officers confirmed Guadalcanal as the target and resolved the ambiguity for Admiral Turner. Despite this late clarity, command fragmentation led to a fatal intelligence vacuum. Admiral Turner, reviewing the search plan for August 8th, discovered that the slot, the most obvious approach for any enemy naval force, was completely uncovered. He requested a special search from Admiral McKean's land-based air forces, but the message was somehow lost between commands. This failure to coordinate searches between General MacArthur's forces, McCain's Navy planes, and Admiral Fletcher's carriers was a direct consequence of the divided command and created the vulnerability that the Japanese would ruthlessly exploit. The First American Offensive. Contrasts in combat. August 7,008, 1942. Landing on Guadalcanal, the unexpected absence of resistance. On the morning of August 7th, 1942, after a preparatory bombardment and airstrikes, 11 Marines, led by General Alexander Vandergrift, landed on Guadalcanal. Lunga Point. The Japanese were entirely surprised, having no inkling of a forthcoming attack. After 8 months of continuous victories, the landings were virtually unopposed, proceeding with almost amazing smoothness. The Marines met resistance only from the jungle terrain itself. The Japanese personnel encountered were largely construction troops and laborers, not combat soldiers, who had fled into the hills, abandoning fully set breakfast tables, intact barracks, and equipment. The extent of the surprise was so complete that one Marine was recorded expressing contempt for the enemy. "I wish those Japanese would come out and fight. All they do is run into the jungle." Advancing rapidly, Marines secured the crucial Lunga Point airfield, later named Henderson Field, by 4:00 p.m. on the 8th, gaining the critical airbase needed to prosecute the long campaign ahead. The battle for Tulagi and Gavutu Tanambogo, ferocious defense. In profound contrast to Guadalcanal, the landings on the nearby small islands of Tulagi, Gavutu, and Tanambogo encountered intense, fierce resistance. These islands were defended by experienced naval troops of the Yokohama Air Base Detachment under Captain Hashik Miyazaki, who had heavily fortified their positions with dugouts, rock embrasures, and interlocking fields of fire. Tulagi became the first testing ground where American forces encountered the Japanese doctrine of fighting to the last man. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson's 1st Marine Raider Battalion, comprising some of the toughest American troops in the Pacific, had to rely on close-quarters combat and explosive charges. They zested dynamite and grenades to clear dugouts, learning that even after a dugout was blown, it might still contain surviving, lethal combatants. The battle was characterized by the Japanese refusal to retreat and their use of calculated tactics, such as snipers allowing the forward Marine element to pass before firing from behind. The Marines also observed the strategic purpose of the Japanese small-caliber bullets, which were often designed to wound rather than kill, requiring additional Allied troops and resources for casualty evacuation. The ferocious resistance resulted in high casualties. On Tulagi, the Marines suffered 90 casualties, while the 250-man Japanese garrison fought until 200 were killed, with only 3 surrendering. The remainder swam the strait to Florida Island to continue fighting. On Gavutu and Tanambogo, where Japanese troop concentrations were higher, the 500-man garrison was wiped out to the last man, causing 250 Marine casualties. This high cost immediately erased any lingering American contempt for the enemy and established the brutal tactical reality of island warfare. The Americans noted early examples of ritualistic suicide among cornered Japanese officers, an attitude that initially surprised the Marines but quickly led them to adopt a no-quarter approach toward Japanese combatants. Air superiority contested, Wildcat F-4F tactics versus the 0-6M. The Japanese 8th Fleet Command at Rabaul reacted immediately to the invasion, canceling missions against New Guinea and dispatching 27 Betty bombers, escorted by 180 fighters. This operation required an immense 100-mile round trip from Rabaul. American F-4F Wildcat pilots, flying planes that were slower and less maneuverable, the superior 0-6M, quickly learned to adapt their tactics based on intelligence assessments. They avoided close-in dogfighting, instead relying on diving attacks, maintaining maximum speed, and using the F-4F's rugged construction and superior firepower. 650 caliber machine guns, providing a greater broadside to withstand punishment. The Zero, though highly agile, suffered from limited armor protection and a low ammunition count, less than 10 seconds of 20mm cannon rounds. On the first day, the Americans proved effective against the bombers, shooting down 23 of 24 Betty bombers. However, the Zero pilots, including Japan's leading ace Saburo Sakai, proved highly effective against the F-4F pilots, who were still learning the trade. The American effort was seriously hampered by the need to fly defensively. The Japanese air logistical strain was enormous due to the Rabaul distance. Commander Nakajima, a fighter squadron leader, resisted sending all available Zeros into the fray, dispatching only his most experienced flyers initially. The sheer distance amplified the F-4F's ruggedness advantage, forcing Zero pilots to take calculated risks on long missions, leading to increased losses even among elite pilots like Sakai, who managed a severely damaged Zero back to Rabaul after being wounded. Naval disaster and crucial missed opportunities. Force Gasti, 1942. The premature retreat. Admiral Fletcher's withdrawal. By the evening of August 8, Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, commander of the Carrier Task Force, providing air cover, Saratoga, Enterprise, Wasp, grew highly anxious. Having lost 21 planes, including fighters essential for carrier defense, Fletcher was unwilling to risk his irreplaceable carriers to land-based attack or Japanese torpedo bombers. Fletcher requested permission from Admiral Gormley to withdraw his carriers, but he began the withdrawal before receiving a reply, moving his force 500 miles south of Guadalcanal. Admiral Kelly Turner, commanding the amphibious forces, intercepted Fletcher's dispatch and recognized that the carrier withdrawal left his transports without any air cover. Concerned about immediate Japanese surface attack, Turner decided to expedite unloading and withdraw the entire transport fleet early on the morning of the 9th of August. This caution, born of the necessity of carrier conservation post-Pearl Harbor, proved strategically damaging as it abandoned the amphibious forces, leaving the 17 Zero Marines ashore critically under strength and without much of their heavy equipment or provisions. Mikawa's approach and the blind spot. Meanwhile, Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa, commander of the Japanese 8th Fleet, had assembled a force comprising 5 heavy cruisers, Chokai flagship, Oboa, Kinukasa, Furutaka, Kako, 2 light cruisers, and a destroyer. Mikawa planned a night attack to capitalize on the IJN's pre-war focus on night fighting tactics and to avoid Allied carrier-based air attack, which could not operate effectively in darkness. Mikawa's force was sighted by Allied aircraft, and the submarine S-38 on the 7th of August moved down from Rabaul, but these reports were dismissed by American naval commanders as routine traffic, failing to connect the sightings to a direct threat against Guadalcanal. The critical vulnerability was the complete failure to cover the slot, the logical northern approach lane, with adequate air search on the 8th of August, despite Admiral Turner's request. This intelligence vacuum allowed Mikawa to move undetected along the slot and achieve complete tactical surprise. The Battle of Savile Island. Tactical perfection. Strategic failure. Mikawa executed his plan nearly perfectly. Slipping past Savile Island, his forces engaged the unsuspecting Allied screening forces, northern and southern groups, beginning at 1:30 a.m. on the 9th of August. Utilizing highly trained night fighting maneuvers, the Japanese enveloped and attacked the Allied ships from 2 sides, resulting in a staggering defeat for the Allies, the worst in U.S. naval history at that time. 4 Allied heavy cruisers, 3 U.S., 1 Australian, were sunk and several other warships were damaged. Despite the overwhelming tactical victory and the urging of some of his staff to press the attack, Mikawa ordered a withdrawal at 2:20 a.m., declining to target the vulnerable Allied transports anchored off Guadalcanal. Mikawa based his decision on 2 factors: the imperative to preserve his heavy cruisers, which he knew were irreplaceable, the IJN had no more in production, and the fear of being caught by Allied carrier aircraft at daylight, which he wrongly assumed were still within striking range. Mikawa's tactical mastery resulted in a crushing naval victory, but his subsequent decision proved to be the single most crucial strategic mistake of the early campaign. By sparing the transports, Mikawa allowed the Marines, though short of supplies, to retain their foothold and essential logistic base on Guadalcanal. This act of strategic myopia preserved the Allied objective, ensuring the subsequent campaign would revolve around the critical airbase that had already been secured. Strategic synthesis, redefining the war's momentum. The period from January to August 1942 encapsulates the rapid transition of the Pacific War's momentum, shifting from Japanese offensive dominance to the establishment of attrition warfare. Admiral Yamamoto's strategic warnings about the long-term futility of war against the industrial might of the United States were validated by the string of events that followed his initial victories. The core of the Japanese failure lay in strategic contradiction. The deep-seated dissonance between the expansionist Army IJA and the resource-constrained Navy IJN, coupled with the devastating necessity of concealing the Midway defeat, locked Japan into prosecuting a campaign, Guadalcanal, for which it no longer possessed the requisite naval and air assets. The IJN's internal deception guaranteed that crucial subsequent decisions were founded upon wildly optimistic estimations of Japanese carrier strength. In contrast, the Allies, spurred by the urgency of the Japanese southward thrust and the psychological lift of Midway, displayed a critical willingness to seize the initiative through calculated risk. Admiral King's political maneuverings secured the launching of Operation Watchtower, despite the crippling logistical chaos, the failure of amphibious rehearsals, and the command fragmentation that led directly to the intelligence vacuum over the slot. The opening days of the Guadalcanal campaign presented a paradoxical situation. A stunning tactical defeat at Savo Island was immediately overshadowed by a decisive strategic gain on land, the unopposed capture of Henderson Field. Fletcher's caution, preserving the carriers, and McCullough's caution, preserving the heavy cruisers, effectively neutralized each other's actions, ensuring that the ground troops survived. McCullough won the battle, but by failing to destroy the Allied logistics train, he ultimately ensured the success of the first major Allied offensive and redefined the Pacific conflict as a grinding, attrition-based island campaign centered on the retention of the critical airbase.